Yo! Video games.
What up, dudes? Matt here from YoVideogames, and I'm back again with another Real Talk video, only this time it's going to be something a little more hot topic, hot button, hot take issue. And that, of course, I'm talking about the Elden Ring Shadows of the Erdtree DLC. And there's been a lot of discussion lately over what's been happening with the DLC and the response to it. Basically, to shorten it, there's been a weird amount of mixed reviews on its Steam page, boiling mostly down to people thinking it's just too difficult, and this has kind of created a lot of back and forth for a franchise and a series and just a company's games that are all notorious for being difficult. And there's a lot of finger pointing, get good, and all that other stuff. But I feel like there is an actual meaningful discussion just sort of be had in there. And I don't think it's quite as simple as this is hard, this is too hard, this is not hard enough, or you all babies. But yeah, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to attempt to offer my thoughts of about 20 hours of gameplay in the DLC. And basically kind of like how I see things. And I'm, for reference, I'm not a super fan of the Soulsborne genre. I'm not, the artistry is out of this world. Like, these are amazing looking games from an artistic perspective. And there is no doubt about that in my mind. And there is a lot of fun to be had in the fact that there's a lot of weapons and different weapon types and then different sort of build types, if you wanted to go like more magic or whatever. So there's a lot of fun to be had in different ways, but I'm not a huge fan of these games in general. This is a franchise that has a lot of dense lore, but isn't really about storytelling. Basically what I mean is, like, when you play a Soulsborne game, it's always you're enjoying, or you are going through an area in a sort of post-apocalyptic or after the major cataclysmic event has happened. And there's not a lot of like big story cutscenes or anything that happen afterwards. Like, there's bosses, you encounter them, you defeat them, and usually there's like some mid-game event that triggers something. But like, again, these games are about lore, not about storytelling. And it's a little, to me, it's you have to do a lot of homework to really get it out, or just watch a video, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I don't think it's a bad thing. It's very unique. I think it's really cool that FromSoft kind of carved out their own way of building up a world, in a very untraditional manner, and I think that deserves credit and praise. And then, otherwise, I don't really, it's real time, which I usually prefer, but it's a very committal heavy game. Swings don't come out immediately. You got to like really be on your game for them. I don't really particularly like that. I enjoy very fast responsiveness in my games. I want my swings to be quick and snappy. I want my reactions to be quick and snappy. I love parrying, which is not usually a thing in a lot of Soulsborne titles. Some games like Sekiro and obviously my favorite, Lies of P. But I guess I'm more of a casual enjoyer. In fact, I didn't really enjoy any FromSoft game until Elden Ring. Elden Ring, the original base game, was easily my favorite From Software developed title in this sort of genre that they've built up of their own. And then my overall favorite since then has been Lies of P for its combat system in particular. But yeah, so that's where I'm at. I'm not a Souls guy really, but Elden Ring I thought was my favorite. It fixed my two biggest issues I usually have with these games, which is number one, the loading, which thanks to the NVMe drives of modern consoles and PCs, loading's not really an issue anymore. And then the other problem I always had was the checkpointing system, where you would actually, after a long load, after dying at a boss, you usually had to run back for 30 to 90 seconds, just running past enemies that you're not going to engage in, just to get back to the fog wall. So I never enjoyed that aspect of it, because it was just a time waster to me. But Elden Ring solved that issue with the Stake of Marika's and then the fast loading. So and here we are, we're on the DLC now, and it's definitely gotten a lot of people sort of weirdly takes weird myths, whatever. And here's the thing, like, is it difficult? Yes. Like, they told you it was going to be difficult, it was said to be difficult, but why is it difficult? And this is where I think we can start to get into things a little bit. So I will say off the bat, I think the problems with Shadows of the Erdtree are not that it's hard. I don't think just overall having an overall generally difficult game or a series of bosses, that's not really a problem per se. I mean, it's kind of what the series is known for. I think the design of Shadows of the Erdtree, to me, is where things kind of are not great. Let me just get into it. Shadows of the Erdtree feels like having a DM at your D&D game get really pissed off over your player group that you've been playing with constantly outwitting and outsmarting you, and the DM's getting pissed, so he's either making changes to the monster manual, to the rule book, to the DM guide. You know, he's making his own edition of D&D, or he's just imposing the most insane things he can to basically just try to like curtail, you know, the player group he's with. So yeah, Shadows of the Erdtree just comes off to me as a sort of like response to people doing crazy things and getting away with it in Elden Ring. And one of the first things that you kind of really see that in is the leveling system. So when you enter, you know, the realm of Shadow, you get hard level scaled. And to me, this is the absolute biggest and weirdest thing. So leveling is completely different in the DLC, where it doesn't matter what level you start the DLC in, because you're basically going to get 2-shotted, 3-shotted by just about anything in the game, even the normal mobs. So how you level is not from actually killing things. You have to go find these skadoosh tree or scattered tree blessings, pieces of bark from the shadow tree or whatever. They're the skadoosh. They will be referred to as skadoosh blessings from this point forward in the video. So there's a finite number of them. Your first level only takes finding 1 piece of skadoosh tree bark, and then the next 9 levels require 2 pieces of skadoosh tree barks, and then the final 10 levels require 3 pieces of skadoosh tree bark. So, you know, there's about like 51 or whatever total skadoosh tree pieces, you know, in the world of Shadows of the Erdtree. And they're hidden. They're in specific spots. They're either held by very specific enemies, but they're usually by these crosses, which are usually next to blessings or, you know, bonfires, if you will. And this kind of robs the game of all sense of progression from fighting enemies. And the response seems to be is it wants you to go out and explore the world, which I generally I like it. You know, I like having good reasons to explore a game world. However, you're in an RPG, and when all the enemies you encounter, killing them, it gets you like the normal, you know, rune experience, but leveling up means basically nothing in the DLC realm, because the real actual, you know, attack and defense boost comes from these skadoosh tree blessings. So I feel like this sort of robs the game of sort of progression. And I think, again, this is sort of a response to people discovering you know, a specific side quest in the original game, which led you to a very high level area full of sleeping enemies that you could really easily kill and just farm the crap out of their runes. And you could level up very quickly, very fast. And heck, it's what I did. You know, that's why I entered into the DLC at like level 168. So like it was almost this response of like, I'm not going to give you the opportunity to find some great place to farm enemies or kill enemies, because the only way you're going to level up now is by finding an item like it's freaking Donkey Kong 64. So yeah, the RPG element feels like it's kind of wasted a bit by like not having you have any progression from actually killing things and leveling up the normal way you've done in every RPG ever. Again, this goes back to me feeling like Miyazaki feels like an angry DM with this DLC. The same goes for your spell. There's an entirely separate item you have to get to level up your spells and your mimics and what have you. And this kind of translates over into the bosses as well. And this is where there's been like back and forth greatly on how difficult the bosses are or not. And I've right now, for full disclosure, I'm on the last boss. I got to him at the end of a stream, and I didn't beat him yet. But it is the last boss of the DLC. I know that. I'm a spoiler hound, you know, sue me. And to me, it's the real complaint kind of comes from the fact that a lot of the bosses have really, really long attack string combos in this game, and they do. It does feel like they're more aggressive, and their attack strings go on for a lot longer, and they generally feel like a tougher overall climb than the original game. Nothing's taken too long for me to beat in the DLC, even some of the notorious bosses. But yeah, you can definitely see that there's this sort of annoyance or anger, at least to me, coming out of the fact that's like, okay, people using mimic tiers and whatever, they're using these blood loss builds, which is funny because stuff like frost stomp and bleeding still are some of the best tactics you can do. But the absolute best tactic so far has just been to beef up a great shield and a spear build and just sort of like be able to block everything, because everything is so attack heavy. But yeah, you get to these bosses and they do one-shot kills immediately. So like you can't just walk into some bosses and immediately summon. Or if you do, you got to be super quick about it. So like, yeah, there's a lot of these sort of just responses, and it's, yeah, I don't know. I mean, if that's the way they wanted to go. The problem I have with the bosses and the way they're designed in this game is that it's a game that, again, it has a ton of different weapons, a ton of different, not job types, but, you can do different build types. If you want to go arcane or whatever, you want to be more of a magic user, be more of a mage, you want to be more of this, more of that. The problem I see with the DLC bosses is that they don't want you to use certain builds become like almost unviable. Like you can make anything work with enough perseverance and just enough perfect dodging, but it seems like it's become like they've really shrunk the viability of a lot of things. Like you got to be at a ridiculously high caliber level to like make a certain type of build work. So it feels like if you're not doing like some cheese strat on these bosses, you're just kind of like making it unnecessarily difficult for yourself. And again, this robs the game of its RPG nature, where it feels like the developer is funneling you towards playing the game a certain way, using a certain type of build, using a certain type of way to level up. So it's all kind of like funneled in. Like I'm not okay with you having like some bloodfly build where you kind of like stand back, and you just sort of like summon bloodflies to like kind of like poke and slowly drain your enemy. Totally a viable thing you could do. And where do I think this comes from? Because here's the thing I want to talk about. Like Elden Ring from the beginning has kind of had this sort of nature from the DM. Like, why am I accusing, say, Miyazaki of being like an angry DM? And this comes from 2 years ago when they patched Elden Ring. Like, they patched certain objects, like they patched some spells, and people would say, well, that's because it was dominating PvP, right? Like Hoarfrost Stomp was too good. People like would invade other people's games and totally kill them with it. Although that again, the flip side of that is like, well, just equip Hoarfrost yourself. But then they did things like nerfing the summons for, like, say, the Mimic tier. And they were doing other things that didn't really affect PvP at all. It's like they just affected the main game. So yeah, they were making changes in patches to the single-player experience of Elden Ring, within the first few months of the game being out, because they didn't like that people were beating the game too easily. They were doing too good. Again, like, to me, this is the part that will get overlooked, and probably the part nobody in the video is going to like notice. If you shout outs to you if you make it this far in the video and you hear this. But yeah, like from the beginning, FromSoft, whether it be Miyazaki or a lead designer or someone, has always sort of seemed to have this sort of bent against players doing too good, because why are they making balance changes to the single player experience of Elden Ring? This was long before the DLC. So they've been doing this from the beginning. So everything in this DLC feels like a response to people were getting too good at the base game, and it being an RPG. Again, this is where I keep coming back to, like, it's like an angry DM. He's a little annoyed that, oh, you had this great idea and you pulled it off and it worked. So, and this even extends a little bit into the environment and level design. So we all know this game's very vertical, right? And like, oh, it's pretty cool. Like, the original game wasn't really so much vertical so much as it was just sort of like flatter. So like this game's like huge because it has all these vertical levels to things. And I look at this verticality and I actually see, again, a sort of overcorrection for the open world nature of the first Elden Ring, and that is because it's vertical, they can create very specific choke points, and they do, because you can't literally reached these certain plateaus unless you go through this very specific area or fight this very specific boss. Like, there's no getting around it. Unless, I'm sure people will find some out of bounds or map glitches or whatever, but like the intended, gameplay way to get to many of the areas in this is you have to go through a specific boss first. So they're taking a game that is open world, and then now they are turning it linear. Like, they are trying to curate the experience. Like, and this goes into the Skadoosh Tree blessings, where like you can only get so many. You can go up maybe 5 levels before you fight the first major critical story boss, and then after that you can open up into other areas of the game world, so you can find other Skadoosh Tree blessings. Like, they literally have taken the concept from Elden Ring Open World, and they've made it linear by having this multi-layered vertical map design, and then they limit where you can go until you beat these specific bosses, where it's like, I want you to fight this boss, I want you to fight him by this point in the game, and I don't want you to be any more than this level while doing the boss. Just everything about the design of this DLC seems counter to the idea of an open world RPG. It doesn't want you to find some weird roundabout way of getting somewhere. It does not want you to find some weird critical, some weird way to level yourself up, some exploit to gain a lot of experience to be super over leveled when you fight a boss. It does not want you to have some wacky build that suddenly staggers and uses all kinds of weird things like, blood flies or whatever to chip away at a boss from a distance. They want you to play this game, go through a very specific set of areas, only get to a certain amount of leveling up, and then fight a very specific boss before you are allowed to go to another part. So yeah, this is where I don't think I like the DLC for this game very much, because again, just reiterating again, going all the way back, it feels like either Miyazaki or FromSoft in general, whoever, they feel like a pissed off DM. And they're annoyed with all the ways people have exploited and found all these cool like workarounds for all the challenges they tried to make for the first game, for the base game, and now they're going to make sure that you can't find any side quest that leads you to an area to let you grind levels really easily. We're gonna make sure you can't get to a certain area of the game without having beaten the specific boss first. We're going to find all these things to basically, make sure you're going down this linear pathway we've designed. This is my campaign, damn it, and you are going to play it the way I want you to, and you are going to suffer in the way I want you to suffer. So, again, and if you love this stuff, I don't think there's a problem with loving games that are hard or challenging. The only problem is when people think like that is, there's some perfect vision, whatever. I am making an honest criticism here where I think specifically for Elden Ring, which is meant to be open world and not meant to be a linear game, not meant to be Demon Souls, I think this flies counter in the face of the entire design philosophy of the original intent of the original game. But I don't know if FromSoft fans are capable of having this conversation. Prove me wrong. I'd love to be proven wrong. I think there's nothing wrong with loving this game, thinking this is the greatest. This DLC is the greatest thing ever. If this is your game of the year, as DLC, that's fine. I don't think there's any problem with loving a challenge or loving the game for being hard or whatever. But can we have an honest discussion? Can we have honest critique of Elden Ring's DLCs? Because here's the thing, one of my favorite games of all time, and definitely the best game I've played in the last 10 years, is full of absolutely stupid, dumb rank, just dumb design decisions, just terrible design decisions, and terrible, there's just terrible things in it, but I love the game anyways. I think you can love a game more than the sum of its parts. I think loving a game despite its faults is fine, but I think there's honesty in the fact that I don't know that this is particularly well designed. Again, I think a lot of people aren't going to really care that it has this sort of linear kind of railroaded experience, where it's you're supposed to only go these places, do these things in a specific order before, it lets you do more. Some people are going to be totally fine with that. And again, some people like the fact that the Skadoosh Tree blessings make you explore the overworld because you really did not need to explore the overworld in the base Elden Ring game at all. If you wanted to beat the game, quote unquote, and even if you wanted to beat the game in multiple ways, there were whole chunks of that map that you didn't need to do anything. Like, or I'm sorry, you didn't need to explore it at all. Like, there were huge chunks of the map that were just completely pointless to explore. You didn't need to do it. Gained you nothing really, especially if there was nothing there for the build of weapon you had. So, yeah, like, you know, that's fine. Again, I don't think there's anything wrong with loving the game, you know, more than life itself or whatever. But I think there is an honest critique to be had here about the DLC, and I hope maybe we can have like an honest, open discussion about this. You know, with what I've presented. Again, this everything in this DLC feels like a weird response to the base game, and it wasn't even problems with Elden Ring 1. It was just things that I feel like made the designers, Miyazaki, the director, it's things that they didn't like. They didn't seem to like the fact that people were able to power level really hard. They didn't like the fact that certain spells and build types were super good, like really good, like didn't like turn your brain off good. They didn't seem to like that people could find ways around to areas of the world map without doing much. They didn't like the fact that probably some whole chunks of the map were just completely irrelevant to explore at all. So all their solutions take what was an open world RPG and kind of just turn it into just a hard linear action experience. And yeah, I don't personally like it. Like, I've enjoyed the DLC enough to get, you know, all the way to the end boss here, but yeah, I'm be honest, I'm disappointed with the DLC. Not because it's hard, but just because it just feels like everything about it has been designed in a way that is just sort of counter to people being good. It's a weird thing. I find the developers very weird. I find the whole design philosophy around this DLC to just be weird and sort of like, it almost feels like there's a sort of a resentment over what people were able to accomplish in the first game. But I don't know. That's me. That's my take on it. Let me know what you guys think, and I will see you on the channel later, dudes.